Hello everyone, today's video will be about the human soul. We will explain what is the human soul and what is the classical view of philosophers about it. So let us go. Let us ask ourselves, what is the world made of? And for the ancient Greeks, like Aristotle, the world was made by matter and form. Matter was the way the form was the way matter was organized. There you can see the form of Freddie Mercury, the form of a human. That applies to all things that we encounter in the world. That applies to dogs, to cats, to pencils, to all of that. Okay? So there you have the form and the matter. The matter is the thing that makes the uh, it fills, let's say, the form. Okay, and the form is the way the matter is organized. And the matter is, the flesh, the bones of the mercury. If it was a pencil, it would be, the wood used and all of that. So this applies to all things in the world, this relationship between matter and form. And this is very different from the perspective of modern philosophers, where they only look at the world and they see that there is matter, that there is only matter. Well, for the ancient, that wasn't like that. There was matter and form. Now, turns out that for Aristotle, the living beings, they had souls. And what is the soul? The soul is the form of the living being. They are alive, they are not like stones because they have movement. Okay? For Aristotle, there were three types of souls. There were a vegetative soul or nutritive soul, a sensitive soul, and a rational soul. The nutritive was possessed by plants, okay? And it was about the reproduction and growth. For animals, it was about being sensitive. They could smell, they could hear, they could feel things, they could do all of those things, okay? Because this is what they have. They have these sensitive capacities, like the capacity of pain. And then you have the final type of soul or of form that is the rational soul, which is the soul that has the powers of thought, of reflection. It has reason and will. And that is like the highest point of view of the soul. I mean, that's the highest state of the soul, let's say. And this is very important because the rational soul, unlike the nutritive and sensitive soul, they are purely physical. However, the rational, it is immaterial. And this is very important because let us ask ourselves, why accept illomorphism instead of dualism? Okay, which is the idea that the soul is a complete substance different from the body. It turns out that there is a problem to that view of dualism, and that is called the interaction problem. The question is, how can a purely mental, let's say, a purely immaterial soul interact with a purely physical body? It doesn't seem to make much sense, because how can a soul, which is purely immaterial, interact with something that is purely material and vice versa? How can the soul, how can a soul trapped in a body interact? And that is the problem of dualism. And materialists always say this, thinking that they have destroyed the idea of the soul. However, this does not apply to illomorphism, because according to Edward Fesser, let us read him, that there is no mystery about how soul and body get into causal connection with contact with one another. For the soul-body relationship is just one instance of a more general relationship existing everywhere in the natural world, namely the relationship between forms. the form of a chair, the form of a tree, the form of an animal, and the matter they organize. If this general relationship is not particularly mysterious, neither is the specific case of the relationship between soul and body. So Illimorphism solves the interaction problem by saying that the intellectual soul, the rational soul, is not a complete substance different from the body, and the body a different substance different from the soul. No, they are one and the same thing. Okay? Yes, the rational thinking and all of that, it is immaterial, but it is not something completely separate. It's right there. If you have, for example, when you die and the rational soul survives because it's immaterial, it will be incomplete, as we will read. Okay? But before, let us explain why the reason and intellect is immaterial. And because when I understand the nature of the dog, this knowledge applies to all dogs. We can look at reality and look at a dog, and by knowing the dog, understanding what makes a dog be what it is, like having four legs, being alive, being sensitive, all of that is the form of the soul, is his essence. And when we understand his soul, I mean his form, we understand all types of dog. Because it doesn't matter if they are black or yellow, they are all dogs. So the intellect understands the world abstractly, and the same thing applies to mathematics and logic. Yes, the reason works abstractly, and it can understand abstract things or pure forms like mathematics, like the Pythagorean theorem, the logical principles. We can understand the principle of non-contradiction, which is immaterial, but it's part of the reality. Now, because the rational soul operates independently of the body, it cannot depend for its continued existence on the continued existence of the body. In short, the human soul, unlike the souls of plants and animals, and unlike any form of any other kind, is a subsistent form. It is capable, in principle anyway, of continuing in existence as a particular thing after its separation from the body in death, and even after the destruction of that body. It is important to emphasize that the human soul does not, in this view, continue on as a complete person, for a person exists only as a union of soul and body. It survives only as a kind of incomplete substance, incapable of performing all of its functions, and in particular those associated with matter. If the person whose soul it is the soul of its ever to exist again as a whole person, the soul must be reunited with its body. And this is the rationale for the traditional theological doctrine of the resurrection of the body. So there you can see how the Christian religion could make sense with the classical understanding of the word, and it makes all sense because it's under the same framework of thought, or it's a very similar. There you can see how the Greek thought was so compatible with Hebrew thought and the thought of the first century of the Jews, how it was compatible with all of those ideas. So, in my case, I suggest you all to keep reading on illimorphism and to accept illimorphism, for it has the best of materialism and the best of dualism, while not being any of those two extremes. And it is better because you do not reject free will, you do not reject love, you do not reject universal, do not reject any of that. But at the same time, you can solve the interaction problem. Thank you.